There is a kind of tired that doesn't come from working too hard. It doesn't live in your shoulders or your feet. It lives somewhere deeper, behind your sternum, in the place where your breath starts. It's the tired that comes from being looked through, day after day, by the very people you wake up early to cook for, the people whose names you carry in your chest like something precious, even when they've stopped carrying yours the same way. I know that tired. I lived inside it for so long that I stopped recognizing it as something wrong. I thought it was just what love felt like after a certain age. Heavy, quietly thankless. Something you bore because you were strong, because your mother was strong, because her mother before her was strong. And none of them ever sat down long enough to ask, who is taking care of the woman doing all the taking care? My name is Winona. I'm 58 years old. I taught high school English for 31 years in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have hands that have graded 10,000 papers and arms that have held one son through every hard thing life handed him. Chickenpox at 7, a broken collarbone at 12, a broken heart at 22, and a wedding at 31 that I smiled through even when something small and quiet in my gut said, "Pay attention, Winona. Pay close attention." I did not pay close enough attention, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That's not how this story starts. This story starts the way all the important ones do, not with a crisis, not with a confrontation, but with something ordinary and beautiful that you don't fully appreciate until it's gone. This story starts with a Tuesday morning in October, coffee that tasted exactly right, and a garden that still believed in me even when I had forgotten to believe in myself. Let me tell you how it started. Raymond planted the rose bushes the summer we moved into the house on Delaney Street. It was 1998. Darius was 8 years old and small enough to ride on Raymond's shoulders while his father dug holes in the red Carolina clay. I stood on the back porch watching them, holding a glass of sweet tea, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the thing people mean when they say they have everything they need. Raymond wasn't a particularly sentimental man. He was an electrician, practical, careful, the kind of person who checked the smoke detector batteries every 6 months and kept the car tires properly inflated, and never once forgot to file our taxes on time. But he had this one soft spot. Roses, Queen Elizabeth roses specifically, the pink climbing kind that come back every year no matter what you do to them, no matter how cold the winter gets. He said his grandmother grew them outside her house in Mississippi, and the smell of them in June was the closest thing he knew to peace. So he planted 6 bushes along the back fence. I didn't know a single thing about roses when we moved in. I was a literature teacher. I knew about roses in poems, roses as symbols, the rose in A Rose for Emily, the rose in Rumi. I did not know about soil pH or pruning schedules or the particular way black spot disease moves through a garden in a wet spring. Raymond taught me, slowly, over years. By the time Darius left for college, I could tend those roses in my sleep. After Raymond died, 4 years ago, a heart attack, sudden, a Thursday afternoon in March that changed the entire grammar of my life, I kept tending them. It was the one thing I knew how to do those first months that wasn't crying or eating things I didn't taste, or sitting in his reading chair, pretending I could still smell him in the fabric. The roses didn't need me to explain myself. They just needed water and attention and the occasional honest words spoken into the morning air. That I could do. The house on Delaney Street was ours free and clear by the time Raymond passed. 31 years of payments, and the last one in 2019, and Raymond had cried a little, just a little, he was not a crier, when he filed the paperwork. We went out to dinner to celebrate. Nothing fancy, the seafood place on Park Road that we'd been going to since 1995. We split the shrimp and grits and drank 2 glasses of wine each and held hands across the table like we were still in our 30s. 8 months later, he was gone. But the house was mine. Fully, legally, completely mine. 112 years old, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. A kitchen I had repainted 4 times over the decades because I changed my mind about yellow. And a back garden with 6 rose bushes that bloomed faithfully every June, like they were keeping a promise Raymond had made, and I was the one left to receive. I had $180,000 in savings. Money we'd been careful about for 30 years. Money that came from packing lunches instead of buying them. From driving cars until they genuinely could not be driven anymore. From 2 people who both grew up without much and decided that security was the greatest luxury they could give their child. I had a teacher's pension that paid me enough to live on. And I had my routines, which are, when you have lived long enough, not small things at all. Every morning I was up by 5:50, coffee by 6. Folger's classic roast, the same brand Raymond bought, because some habits are love made practical and I saw no reason to change them. I had exactly 20 minutes alone at the kitchen table before the rest of the world made its claims on me. I read, I thought, I watched the light change in the backyard. Those 20 minutes were mine the way very little else was mine, and I guarded them without apology. Every Sunday I made my grandmother Odessa's cornbread. Cast iron skillet, real butter, the kind of recipe that has no measurements because the measurements are in your hands, passed down through touch rather than text. The smell of it baking, sweet and warm and specific, was the smell of every good Sunday of my childhood, and then every good Sunday of my marriage, and then every good Sunday I made for Darius as he grew. I had my reading chair, a big green armchair in the corner of the living room, the fabric worn soft as skin from years of use. Raymond's chair faced the television. Mine faced the window. We never needed to discuss it. In the evenings, we'd sit in the same room going entirely different places, and that was its own kind of perfect. And I had Darius, my son, my one child born on a cold February morning when I was 24 years old, and I had looked at his face and understood immediately that I would do absolutely anything for this person. Absolutely anything. No conditions, no asterisks, no fine print. That love, that particular irrational, bone-deep love, is its own kind of vulnerability. The people who love their children most completely are also the people most available to be quietly undone by them, not by cruelty necessarily, sometimes just by distance, by the slow, unremarkable fact of being loved less carefully than you love. I should say clearly, Darius was a good son, is a good son fundamentally underneath everything that happened. He was kind as a child, thoughtful. He sent birthday cards, real ones, written by hand, and called every Sunday until he was in his early 30s, and the calls became less regular, which I told myself was normal, which it was, which didn't make it hurt less. He became a civil engineer, built things, bridges, drainage systems, the invisible infrastructure that holds cities together. Raymond would have been so proud, was proud, the 3 years he lived to see it. Darius worked for a construction and development firm run by a man named Preston Wade, successful, well-connected, the kind of Charlotte businessman whose name appears on building plaques and charity galas and the acknowledgments page of the Chamber of Commerce annual report. Darius was good at his job. He was 31 and stable and happy, as far as I could tell, when he brought Sabrina home to meet me for the first time. I want to be honest about Sabrina, because honesty is the only thing I have left to give this story, and I intend to give it fully. She was beautiful. That's the first thing. Tall, light-skinned, with the kind of effortless style that made everything she wore look intentional. She was smart. I could tell that within 10 minutes of meeting her. Quick with language, perceptive, with a way of watching a room that reminded me, uncomfortably, of the sharpest students I'd ever taught. The ones who understood leverage before they understood calculus. She was warm to me that first night, asked about my teaching career, admired the house, said something genuinely lovely about the roses that I found out later she'd Googled before coming over. Raymond planted those? That's so beautiful, that he chose something that would keep coming back. I liked her. I want to say that plainly. In the beginning, I liked her. What I also noticed and filed away without examining too closely was the way she and Darius moved around each other. He was slightly off balance in her presence, the way a planet is off balance when it's caught in a stronger orbit, always slightly turned toward her. Always, I noticed, waiting to see how she felt before settling into how he felt. I told myself this was new love. I told myself I was being an overly watchful mother. I told myself that Raymond had sometimes deferred to me in social situations, and I hadn't thought of that as imbalance. I'd thought of it as partnership. I told myself a lot of things in those years. That's the thing about slow erosion. It doesn't announce itself. It just keeps moving, patient and quiet, and by the time you see what's been worn away, the shape of the land has already changed. They got married 18 months after they started dating. A beautiful wedding. Outdoor ceremony in September. The kind of Charlotte evening that smells like warm earth and just turning leaves. I wore my good blue dress and I danced with my son and I cried the right kind of tears, the kind that come from fullness rather than loss. I gave them $35,000 for the down payment on their house. I want to be precise about this because precision matters. Raymond had always said, Winona, if we're going to give Darius money for something big, we do it right. We document it. We treat it like a loan even if we never collect, because paperwork protects everyone, including him. So we had a document, drawn up by Theodore Holt, Raymond's old friend and our family attorney for 20 years, notarized and filed. $35,000, structured as a loan, interest-free, to be repaid when they were able. It was never meant as a trap. It was meant as protection. For Darius, for me, for the integrity of the thing. Raymond's voice in my ear. Love and paperwork are not opposites, Win. The paperwork is part of the love. They bought a house in Concord, 20 minutes north. 3 bedrooms, a 2-car garage, a yard Sabrina said she wanted to turn into a garden someday. I brought them a housewarming gift, a potted Queen Elizabeth rose cutting from my back garden, rooted in a terracotta pot, with a card that said, "From Raymond's garden to yours. May it keep coming back." Sabrina thanked me and set it on the porch. I don't know what happened to that cutting. I never saw it again. The first year of their marriage, I noticed small things. They were just small things. I want to be clear about that. Nothing that would hold up in any court of reasonable concern. Just small things that I noticed and then talked myself out of noticing. I used to stop by on Saturday afternoons. Not every week, but often enough that it felt like a rhythm. The way mothers do. The way I had always imagined being a mother-in-law. Present, helpful, not intrusive. I'd bring something, cornbread or tomatoes from my garden, or once a cast-iron skillet I found at an estate sale that I thought Sabrina might like. Around month 4, Sabrina mentioned, gently but clearly, that they were very private people, and she'd feel more comfortable if I called ahead before coming over. I understood. I respected it. I started calling ahead. Then the calls needed to go through Sabrina's schedule. "She manages our calendar," Darius said with a small, slightly apologetic smile. "You know how I am with keeping track of things, Mom." I did know. Darius had always been scatterbrained about scheduling. I had always been the one who remembered dentist appointments and school picture days and the dates of things that mattered. So I accepted this, too. The Sunday dinners. The ones I'd hosted my whole life. The ones that smelled like cornbread and Raymond's sweet tea, and the specific warmth of people who belonged to each other, became less frequent. Every week became every other week. Every other week became once a month. Once a month became we'll try to make it. But Sabrina has a thing, Mom. I'm sorry. Each individual change was reasonable. Each individual accommodation was something I could explain. But I noticed, and I want to name this precisely because I think a lot of women my age know exactly what I mean. I noticed that the accommodating only ever went one direction. I adjusted my schedule. I adjusted my expectations. I adjusted my language, my timing, my approach. And the distance between me and my son kept growing, quietly, like something breathing. One evening, it must have been 15 months into their marriage, Darius and Sabrina came for dinner. Just the 3 of us, a rare thing by then. We were sitting at my kitchen table and Sabrina was talking about a party she and Darius had attended the previous weekend, thrown by someone from Darius's firm. She was describing the house, the food, the people, and she said a name in passing. Preston was there. He has the most incredible taste. Honestly? And something in the way she said it made me look up from my plate. Not the words, just the tone. The slight softening around the name. The way it sat differently in her mouth than the other names she mentioned. I looked at her. She was already moving on to the next sentence. I looked at Darius. He was eating his cornbread. I looked back at my plate. That's strange, I thought. And then I thought, you're looking for problems, Winona. Stop looking for problems. I put the thought away. I kept it in a drawer in the back of my mind, the way you keep things you're not ready to examine. Face down, pushed to the back, under other things. That drawer would get heavier over the next 4 years. But on that particular evening, in the kitchen that smelled like butter and cast iron, and everything I had built over 3 decades, with my son across the table from me and the October dark settling soft outside the window, I simply finished my dinner. I washed the dishes after they left. I made sure the porch light was off. I went to bed. And somewhere in the dark between waking and sleep, I thought about Raymond, the way I did every night, the way I suspected I always would. And I thought, I wish you were here. I wish you could tell me if I'm reading this right, or if I'm just a lonely woman who sees shadows because she's afraid of the light going out. Raymond did not answer. He never did. But the roses were still out there in the dark, alive and waiting, keeping their quiet promise. And the coffee was still good in the morning, for now, at least. For now. The second year of their marriage, Darius lost his job. Not fired exactly. Preston Wade restructured his firm. The way successful men restructure things when the market shifts and they need to protect their margins. And an entire tier of mid-level engineers was let go in a single Friday afternoon email. Darius called me that evening. His voice was steady in the way voices are steady when the person is working very hard to hold something together. "It'll be fine, Mom. I'm already reaching out to people. I have a good resume." "I know you do, baby," I said. "Come for dinner Sunday. Both of you." Sabrina had a prior commitment that Sunday. Darius came alone. He sat at my kitchen table and ate 2 pieces of cornbread, and we talked for 3 hours about his options, his savings, the job market in Charlotte for someone with his experience. He seemed, by the time he left, genuinely steadier. That was always the thing about my son. He just needed someone to sit with him in the hard thing without flinching. Raymond was the same way. What I noticed, but did not say, was this. Darius did not seem surprised that Sabrina hadn't come. He had not tried to convince her. He had arrived alone the way you arrive alone to things that belong only to one part of your life, and his mother, it seemed, had become only one part. I told myself, she gave him space to be with his mother. That's mature. That's respectful. I told myself a lot of things that year. Darius found new work within 6 weeks. A smaller firm, less prestigious, salary down roughly 30%. He didn't complain. He was Raymond's son in that way. You adjusted, you kept moving, you didn't make a theater out of difficulty. What I did not know, what I would not know for years, was that the household expenses had not adjusted along with the income. Sabrina had never worked, not since the wedding. This was a choice they had made together, Darius told me, and I had kept my thoughts about it to myself because it was not my marriage and not my decision. Some women don't work outside the home. That is not, in itself, a problem. The problem is when the lifestyle built on 2 incomes refuses to compress itself around one. But I didn't see the finances. I only saw what came to the surface. And what came to the surface around month 8 of the new job was Sabrina with a handbag I recognized as expensive. The kind of bag that has a waiting list. The kind that costs more than my monthly pension check. She carried it to a birthday dinner for Darius that October. I noticed it the way I noticed most things about Sabrina. Carefully, quietly, without comment. Good for her, I told myself. Maybe it was a gift. Maybe she saved for it. It's none of your business, Winona. I put that observation in the drawer too. The drawer was getting full. The 3rd year was when the language changed. It was gradual. The way all the significant changes were. But looking back, I can date it almost precisely to a Sunday afternoon in March when Sabrina walked through my house differently than she ever had before. They had come for lunch. An actual visit, which had become rare enough to feel like an occasion. I had made pot roast, Raymond's favorite, mine too, and the cornbread, and a sweet potato pie that had taken me the better part of Saturday to get right. The table was set properly. I was, I realize now, performing a kind of hopefulness. See, this is still here. We are still this. Sabrina ate lightly and talked pleasantly, and then, while Darius helped me clear the table, she wandered through the house in a way she hadn't before. Not rudely, just assessingly. The way you look at a property you're considering rather than a home you're visiting. She paused at the doorway of Raymond's room. I had kept it largely as it was. His reading chair, his books arranged the way he'd arranged them. A photograph of the 3 of us, me, Raymond, Darius at about 12, on the desk. I had repainted the walls the year after he died because I needed to do something with my hands, but otherwise the room held the shape of him. This is such a big room to just be a, what do you use it for? Sabrina asked. Her voice was easy, curious. No edge in it that I could have pointed to. It's Raymond's room, I said. She turned and smiled at me with something that wasn't quite sympathy. Mama W., he's been gone 4 years. Don't you think it might be time to make it something useful? Darius had gone quiet behind me. I said pleasantly, I find it useful exactly as it is. And that was that. The subject changed. We moved to the living room. Darius and I talked about a book we'd both read. Sabrina looked at her phone, but something had shifted. A door had opened that I hadn't invited anyone to open, and although I'd closed it firmly, I could feel the draft. Over the following months, the comments accumulated. Small ones, each individually dismissible. This neighborhood has really changed, hasn't it? Have you thought about whether it still makes sense for you here? Darius was saying the upkeep on an older house like this must be a lot for one person. Have you ever thought about a smaller place? Something more manageable? And then, one afternoon in August, the one I couldn't dismiss, Theodore Holt called me to check in. He did this occasionally, had done it since Raymond died, a gesture of old loyalty I found genuinely comforting. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing much. Before he hung up, almost as an afterthought, he said, "Winona, this is probably nothing, but I want to mention it. A young woman came into my office last week, said her name was Sabrina Mitchell, asked some general questions about the process of transferring property titles between family members while the owner is still living, gift deeds, that kind of thing. I was quiet. She said she was asking on your behalf, said you'd been meaning to look into it. The kitchen was very still around me. I hadn't asked her to do that, Theodore." A pause. "That's what I thought. I didn't give her any specific information, just general public knowledge. But I wanted you to know." After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time without moving. The afternoon light moved across the floor the way it always did, slow and golden, the way it had moved across this floor for 22 years. That was twist one. Not a confrontation, not a scene, just a phone call, and a cold, clarifying feeling, like stepping from a warm room into winter air, that certain questions were being asked about my life and my property that I had not authorized anyone to ask. I opened the drawer in the back of my mind, looked at everything I'd been storing there. The name Preston said softly at my dinner table, the expensive handbag on a reduced income, the tour of my house with assessing eyes, the questions about Raymond's room, the comments about whether this house still made sense for me. I didn't know what the full picture was yet, but I could see that there was a picture, that I was in it, and that I had not been consulted about being placed there. I called Theodore back the next morning. "Theodore, I need to make sure my paperwork is all in order. The house, the savings accounts, the loan document for Darius, everything." "I'll pull the files," he said. "Come in Thursday." I went in Thursday. Everything was in order. The house was mine. The loan document was valid, notarized, clear. Theodore had drafted it carefully, the way Raymond had asked him to. I drove home feeling something I couldn't immediately name. Not quite relief. Not quite dread. Something between them. The feeling of a person who has checked that the doors are locked and is grateful they are, but troubled by the fact that checking felt necessary. The 4th year was the year Darius's eyes started going to his phone. I noticed because I am a person who notices things. 31 years of reading students' faces will do that to you. And because this was new. Darius had never been someone who hid in his phone. He was present when he was present. It was one of the things I loved most about him. But starting sometime around that winter, his phone began to occupy a particular position on every table he sat at. Face down. The small, deliberate face down of someone managing information. Gloria noticed too. Gloria Watkins has been my neighbor and my closest friend for 20 years. She lost her husband Clarence 3 years before I lost Raymond, and we had built our widowhood together the way women build most important things. Incrementally, practically, with humor and honesty, and very good coffee. She is the person I trust most in the world after Raymond, and she has a way of saying the hard thing gently that I have always depended on. She came to me on a Thursday evening in February, stood at my kitchen door with her coat still on, and her hands folded in front of her, the way she holds them when she's working up to something difficult. "Winona, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." I sat down. "Last Wednesday I was at Founders Hall, the lunch place on Trade Street, you know the one, and I saw Sabrina." "Okay," I said. "She was with a man, older, well-dressed. It wasn't a business lunch, Win, the way they were sitting, the way he touched her hand." The kitchen was quiet. "I don't know who he was. I didn't want to assume, but I've been sitting with it for 2 weeks, and I can't not tell you." That was twist 2. Again, not a scene, not a confrontation. Just Gloria standing in my kitchen with her coat on and her hands folded and the look of a woman delivering something she wishes she didn't have to carry. I sat with it for a moment. Then I said, "What did he look like?" Gloria described him. Tall, 50s, silver at the temples, a dark overcoat that fit well. I thought about the name Preston said softly at my dinner table 4 years ago, the softening around it. The way it had sat differently in Sabrina's mouth than the other names. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said. "I'm going to sit with it." After Gloria left, I went to my green armchair, sat down, looked out the window at the dark backyard where I knew, though I couldn't see them, Raymond's roses were dormant in the February ground, waiting. I did not cry. I was past the age of crying quickly over things. Life had taught me to let the full shape of something become clear before I responded to it. Too many years of too many students crying over the wrong things. Too many years of watching people spend their grief on the surface problem while the deeper one went unaddressed. I sat in the chair for a long time, and then I did something I had not done in 4 years. I went to Raymond's room, sat in his chair, put my hands on the armrests where his hands used to rest. "Raymond," I said out loud to the room, to whatever of him might still be folded into the fabric and the air. "I think I've been not seeing things on purpose. I think I've been protecting Darius by pretending not to notice what was happening around him. And I think that protecting him that way might actually be the least protective thing I could do." The room was quiet. "I think it's time to pay attention." The phone call came on a Tuesday. Darius, alone. Sabrina wasn't with him, which was itself a kind of signal. His voice had the particular quality of a person who has been rehearsing what they're about to say and has not quite found the version that makes it sound okay. "Mom, can I come over? I need to talk to you about something." He arrived within the hour. He sat at my kitchen table, the same chair he'd sat in as a child, the same chair he'd sat in when he called me crying at 22, the same chair where every important conversation of his life had happened, and he looked at his hands. "Sabrina and I sold the house," he said. I set my coffee cup down slowly. "When?" "The sale closed last week. We got $580,000. "Darius," I kept my voice level. "Why didn't you tell me? I have a lien on that property." He flinched. "I know. Mom, I know. I'm sorry. It happened fast, and there's more I need to tell you." He told me. The $65,000 in credit card debt he hadn't known about until 6 months into the marriage. Accounts in Sabrina's name, spending he had never seen, that she'd told him were old debts from before, almost paid off. Don't worry about it. The second mortgage taken out 18 months ago to cover expenses when his salary dropped. $90,000. Payments they'd been making quietly. Money he thought was going toward getting ahead. And then he told me about the investment. Sabrina put money into a business, a spa, owned by a friend of hers. "How much?" He looked at the table. $200,000. The number sat between us like something that had fallen and broken. "Darius, that's almost the entire equity from the house." "I know." "Is the spa operating? Can we see financial statements? A business license?" "Mom." He finally looked up. His eyes were the eyes of someone who already knows the answer and is exhausted by knowing it. "I've been trying to find information on it for 2 weeks. I can't find a business license. I can't find a storefront. The address Sabrina gave me is a UPS store. That was twist 3. And it arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet devastation of a man sitting at his mother's kitchen table saying the words, "I can't find a business license," in a voice stripped of every defense he had left. I looked at my son. I thought about the $35,000 I had given them, documented and notarized, money from 30 years of careful living. Raymond's voice saying the paperwork is part of the love. I thought about the name Preston and Gloria standing in my kitchen with her coat on. I thought about Sabrina walking through my house with assessing eyes, asking what Raymond's room was useful for. And I understood, with the full cold clarity I had been working toward for 4 years, that what had been happening in my son's marriage was not carelessness. It was not immaturity. It was not two young people making mistakes. It was deliberate, patient, directed. And my son, my careful, decent Raymond's son, had been standing in the middle of it, face turned toward a woman he loved, not seeing what she was doing because he had not wanted to see it, and because she was very, very good at being looked at. "Darius," I said. My voice was quiet. "I need you to listen to me carefully." He looked at me. "I love you. That is not in question. It has never been in question, and it never will be." "Mom, let me finish." I put my hand over his on the table. "You need to know some things, and then you need to decide what you're going to do with them. But first, tell me one more thing." "What?" "The man Sabrina has been spending time with, Preston Wade. The color left his face so completely and so immediately that I had my answer before he said a word. He put his head in his hands, and I sat with my son in the kitchen that smelled like coffee and 30 years of love, and I let him be in the hard thing, and I did not look away. Outside in the February dark, Raymond's roses were still there, waiting for spring, waiting, the way the best things do, to come back. The morning after Darius left, I woke at 5:45, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table. The house was the same house it had always been, same light, same quiet, same slow creak of the radiator. But something had shifted in the night, the way things shift when you finally stop holding them in place. I sat with my coffee, and I did something I had not permitted myself to do in 4 years of careful not noticing. I told myself the truth. Not about Sabrina, about myself. "You knew," I said to the woman sitting at that table in the early morning quiet. "You didn't know the details. You didn't know about the debt or the fake business or Preston Wade by name. But you knew something was wrong from the very first year. You knew when she changed the visiting schedule. You knew when she walked through this house with those eyes. You knew when Theodore called about the title questions. You knew when Gloria came to your door with her coat on. You knew. And you put it in a drawer. And you kept putting things in that drawer because taking them out meant having a conversation that might cost you your son. And you were so afraid of losing him the way you lost Raymond, suddenly, without warning, on a Thursday in March, that you chose a slower loss instead. You chose to be present for less and less of him rather than risk being cut off entirely. That's what you did, Winona. That's the truth of it. I sat with that for a long time. The light changed in the backyard. The roses were still dormant, dark canes against the gray February fence. Then I picked up my phone and called Theodore Holt. "Theodore, it's Winona. I need to come in today if you can see me. I need to understand exactly where I stand. The house, the loan, all of it. And I need to know my options." A pause. Then, with the steadiness of a man who has known me for 20 years and understands what it means when I use that particular voice, "Come at 10, he said. "I'll have everything ready." I hung up, sat for one more moment in the quiet. Then I stood up, washed my cup, and went to get dressed. Not in anger, not in grief, in something cleaner than either. The particular resolve of a woman who has finally, fully, decided to stop managing her own diminishment and start standing in her own life instead. Outside, the roses waited. Spring was coming. Theodore's office was on the 4th floor of a building on South Tryon Street that had been there since 1962 and smelled accordingly. Old wood, old paper, the particular mustiness of a place that has held a great many people's most important documents and absorbed something of the weight of each one. I had been coming here since Raymond was alive, since before Darius was born even. Theodore Holt had written our wills, handled our closing when we bought the house on Delaney Street, and sat with me in the terrible week after Raymond died, and helped me understand what I now owned, and what I now owed, and what it meant to be a woman alone with an estate, however modest, and a grief, however enormous. He was 65 now, silver-haired, careful, with reading glasses he was always misplacing and finding again on top of his own head. He reminded me in small ways of Raymond, the same quality of steadiness, the same instinct toward precision, the same belief that clarity was a form of kindness. He had the files spread across his desk when I arrived. "Sit down, Winona," he said. "Let me show you where you stand." Where I stood was this. The house on Delaney Street was mine. Completely, legally, unambiguously mine. My name alone on the title. No joint accounts attached to it. No liens beyond the original mortgage which had been paid in full in 2019. Whatever Sabrina had been asking Theodore's office about, gift deeds, title transfers, she had received no information, and nothing had been signed because I had signed nothing. The loan document, $35,000, notarized, filed, was valid and enforceable. Theodore had structured it carefully at Raymond's request, and it had survived intact. Darius and Sabrina had sold the house on Maple Creek Drive without satisfying the lien, which was, Theodore explained in his measured way, a legal problem for them. "What are my options?" I asked. "You can forgive the debt," he said. "You can negotiate a payment plan, or you can pursue repayment through the courts, since the lien was attached to the property and they transferred the property without settling it." If I pursued it through the courts, what would that look like? A civil suit, the debt plus interest plus legal costs. We have clear documentation. It would not be a difficult case to make. I looked at my hands in my lap. I don't want to destroy my son. Theodore looked at me over his reading glasses with the particular expression of a man who has seen many families make many decisions about money and love and the complicated space between them. Winona, he said, there is a difference between destroying your son and requiring your son to reckon with what has happened. One of those things is punitive. The other is parental, in the truest sense. I thought about Raymond, about the promissory note. The paperwork is part of the love, Win. Send them a formal letter, I said finally. Through your office, acknowledging the debt, requesting a repayment plan, making clear that I am aware of my legal standing. I'm not filing suit today, but I want them to know that I know where I stand. Theodore nodded. That I can do. Today, if you'd like. Please. He picked up his pen. Then he paused. There's something else I want to say to you, and I hope you'll receive it the way it's intended. Go ahead. Raymond asked me a few months before he died to keep an eye on things. He didn't specify what things. He just said, Theodore, Winona is going to be fine because she's the strongest person I've ever known, but she has a blind spot. She loves too much in one direction and sometimes forgets to look after herself. The office was very quiet. I think he would be glad you came in today, Theodore said. I nodded. I did not trust my voice for a moment. Then I said, So would I. I drove home through Charlotte's midday traffic, and I did something I had not done in 2 years. I called the book club. It had been a Thursday evening group, 7 women, most of them retired or near it, who met at rotating houses to read and argue and drink wine and say the things women say when they are finally, blessedly, among people who do not need anything from them. I had been a founding member. I had hosted it for years. Somewhere in the 3rd year of Darius's marriage, I had started missing meetings. Sabrina would call on Thursday afternoons with something that needed doing. Could I come sit with a delivery? Could I help with something at the house? Could I? And because I was still in the season of believing that availability was the same as closeness, I would say yes, and miss the book club, and tell myself I'd go next month. I had not been in 14 months. I called Rosalind, who organized the group, a 70-year-old retired pediatrician with opinions about literature that were both completely wrong and completely wonderful. Winona Mitchell, she said when she picked up. I was starting to think you'd moved to another state without telling me. I'm sorry, Rosalind. I paused. I've been managing some things. I'd like to come back, if you'll have me. Child, we've been saving your chair. Thursday, Patricia's house. We're doing Their Eyes Were Watching God and I Have Opinions. You always have opinions. And they are always correct. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. I hung up smiling. A real smile. The kind that comes from the chest rather than the face. Then I drove to the nursery on Providence Road. I had been meaning to add to Raymond's rose garden for 3 years. Meaning to, and not doing it, because doing it felt like changing something that should stay unchanged. As if the garden was a record of him, and adding to it was somehow an edit, an alteration of what he had made. But I had sat in his chair the night before and told him the truth, and what I understood now, sitting in that quiet room, was that he had not planted those roses so that I would preserve them exactly as he left them. He had planted them because he wanted me to have something that kept coming back, something alive, something that required tending. Adding to the garden was not erasing him. It was continuing what he started. I bought 2 climbing roses, a deep burgundy variety called Tuscany Scarlet that I had admired in a catalog for years but never let myself purchase, and a small pot of lavender for the border because I had always wanted lavender and had never quite gotten around to it, and because at 58 years old I had finally understood that getting around to it was a choice, not an inevitability. I planted them that afternoon, knelt in the red Carolina clay in my old jeans with my hands in the cold February earth, and worked until the light went gray and my back reminded me of my age and the new roses were settled in alongside Raymond's old ones. I stood up, looked at the garden. There, I thought. That's yours, Raymond. And that's mine. And they can grow together. 3 days after Theodore sent the letter, Darius called. He did not sound angry. He sounded, if anything, relieved. The way people sometimes sound when a thing that has been inevitable finally arrives and they can stop bracing for it. Mom, I got the letter from Theodore. I know. I want you to know. I'm not going to fight it. The debt is real. I should have paid it back. I should have told you about the house before we sold it." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." A pause. "Mom, I left. I moved out of the motel we were staying at. I'm in an apartment now. It's not much, but it's mine." Something in my chest loosened. "Darius, are you all right?" "Not really," he said, "but I think I'm going to be. That's enough for right now." "Mom, I need to tell you something. About the $200,000. The spa business." He was quiet for a moment. "I went back through everything. The account Sabrina transferred the money to. It's not a business account. It's a personal account. Registered to Preston Wade, LLC. The kitchen was very still. "She didn't invest in her friend's business," he said. "She gave $200,000 to him." I had known on some level since Gloria's visit, but hearing it spoken plainly by my son's voice, hearing the full, clear shape of it, was different from knowing. It settled into the room like something that would not be moved again. "Darius," I said, "I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I keep thinking, how long did I know and just not let myself know it?" "A long time, I think," I said as gently as I could. "But that's not the same as being stupid. That's what happens when you love someone and you don't want to see what seeing would cost you." A long silence. "That sounds like something Dad would say." "It does," I agreed. He was smarter than both of us. Darius laughed. A small, surprised sound. The first real laugh I'd heard from him in longer than I could remember. "Mom, I'm going to pay you back. Every cent. It'll take me a few years, but I'll pay it back." "I know you will," I said. "That was never what this was about." "What was it about?" I thought about how to answer that. About Theodore's office and Raymond's chair and the drawer full of things I'd been not looking at for 4 years. "It was about making sure you understood that the people who love you aren't resources," I said finally. "They're people, with limits and rights and things that belong to them. And when you love someone the way I love you, you sometimes forget to make that clear. Because you think love means being available for anything. But it doesn't. Love means being honest, even when honest is hard, maybe especially then." Another silence. Longer this time. "I hear you, Mom," he said softly. "I really hear you." The following Thursday, I went to the book club. Patricia's house was warm and bright and smelled like the red wine Rosalind had already opened before anyone arrived. There were 7 of us around Patricia's dining room table, women between 55 and 72, most of us widowed or divorced, all of us with the particular quality of women who have lived long enough to stop performing things they don't mean. Rosalind did indeed have opinions about Their Eyes Were Watching God. So did I. We argued pleasantly for 45 minutes about Janie Crawford and what she wanted and whether she got it and what Hurston meant by the horizon, and I felt sitting in that room something I had not felt in years, myself. Not Darius's mother, not Raymond's widow, not the woman managing the space between what was and what she wished it was. Just Winona, a woman who loved literature and had thoughts about it and had been missed by people who valued her thoughts. On the way home, I stopped and sat in my car for a moment outside my own house. The porch light was on. I had put it on a timer after Raymond died, because coming home to a dark house was the thing I found hardest. The light fell yellow and warm on the front steps. I live here, I thought. This is mine. I built this. I went inside, made tea, sat in the green armchair, the one I'd been meaning to have recovered for 2 years, the fabric worn thin at the armrests. And I made a decision. I called the upholstery place on Central Avenue the next morning. "Same green," I told them. "Brighter." 6 months later, in August, I was in the back garden deadheading the roses when I heard the gate. I turned, expecting Gloria. Instead, a young woman stood at the garden gate, late 20s, slight, with natural hair and careful eyes, and a quality of hesitation that told me she had practiced what she was about to say several times on the way here. She looked like Sabrina. The same bone structure, lighter. But where Sabrina's face had always had that quality of calculation beneath the surface, this face was just tired. The tiredness of someone carrying something they didn't choose. "Mrs. Mitchell?" she said. "I'm Courtney. I'm Sabrina's sister." I looked at her for a moment. Then I opened the gate. "Come in," I said. "I'll put coffee on." We sat on the back porch. The same porch where I had watched Raymond and 8-year-old Darius dig holes in the Carolina clay on a summer afternoon 25 years ago. Courtney held her coffee mug with both hands the way young people do when they are cold or nervous or both, and she told me her story in the careful, honest way of someone who has decided that honesty is the only thing she has left to offer. Sabrina was in Atlanta. A new name, her middle name, used now as her first. A new story, a vindictive ex-husband, a family that had turned against her, a woman wronged and working to start over, a new man, older, established, beginning to trust her with things. I've been trying to figure out how to stop her for 2 years, Courtney said. But I can't stop her. She doesn't hear me. She never has. She looked at her coffee. I just wanted to find someone who had come through it. Someone who could tell me that the people that they were okay. I looked at this young woman on my porch, thought about what it cost to come here, to knock on a stranger's door and say, my sister did this to you, and I am sorry, and I need to know you survived it. I'm okay, I said. How? She asked, not rudely, genuinely, with the real hunger of someone who needs an actual answer. I thought about it. I stopped trying to not see things, I said finally. I had been putting things in a drawer for 4 years, things I noticed but didn't want to deal with. And at some point the drawer got too full and I had to open it. And then I called my lawyer, and I called my book club, and I bought some roses. I nodded toward the back garden where the new burgundy climbers were well established now against the fence, growing alongside Raymond's old Queen Elizabeths in a way that looked, by August, as though they had always been there together. And I started remembering who I was before I got so busy being what everyone else needed. Courtney looked at the garden. That's it? She said. That's how you come back? That's how I came back, I said. I can't tell you how you will, but I think it starts with the same thing, being honest, even about the things you've been pretending not to see. She nodded slowly. We sat for a while in the August warmth, not talking. The roses moved slightly in the small breeze that came up in the evenings off the street. Somewhere in the neighborhood a lawnmower started and stopped. A cardinal landed on the back fence, looked at us with complete indifference, and flew away. I thought about Raymond, about the way he used to sit on this same porch on summer evenings, with a glass of sweet tea and the comfortable silence of a man who was exactly where he wanted to be. I'm still here, I told him in my mind. I'm still in our house, and the roses are still blooming, and our son is going to be all right. He's going to be all right, Raymond. The evening was warm and still, and smelled like grass and the faint sweetness of the roses. I refilled Courtney's coffee without asking if she wanted more. She wrapped both hands around the mug again and seemed slightly to unclench. We talked until the light went gold and then gray, and the porch light came on automatically, the way it always did. I sent her home with a Tupperware container of cornbread, Grandmother Odessa's recipe, cast iron, real butter, because that is what I do. Because some things you keep doing not out of obligation but out of love, and the difference between those two reasons is everything. After she left, I washed the coffee mugs and wiped down the porch table and checked the garden one last time the way I always did before dark, walking the fence line, touching the canes lightly, the way Raymond had taught me, feeling for the particular resilience of a plant that is rooted well and growing toward what it needs. The burgundy climbers were doing beautifully. One of them had sent a new cane arching up along the fence since last week, 6 inches of new growth, reaching. I stood in the garden in the last of the August evening and I thought, this is it. This is still the thing people mean when they say they have everything they need. Not because nothing had been lost, because what remained was real. I went inside, made coffee for the morning, set the timer the way I always did, so it would be ready at 6. Went to bed. In the morning I woke at 5:50 the way I always do. The house was quiet, the good quiet, the kind that belongs to you. I poured my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, watched the early light beginning its slow move across the backyard, finding the roses the way it always did, the way it had done for 22 years, the way I believed it would keep doing long after I was gone. I wrapped both hands around the mug, took a sip, and the coffee tasted right. Exactly, perfectly, completely right. The way it had tasted every morning of my marriage, the way it had stopped tasting somewhere in the years of the drawer, and the not seeing and the slow erasure of myself in the service of keeping everyone else comfortable. I sat with it for a moment. Just sat with it. There you are, I thought. There you are, Winona. I don't know exactly when I came back to myself. It wasn't one morning. It wasn't one decision. It was Theodore's office, and the book club, and the burgundy roses, and the phone call where my son finally cried, and the honest conversation I had with myself at this table at 6 in the morning when the house was quiet and there was no one left to perform for. It was all of those things together. It was the long, undramatic work of a woman who decided, at 58 years old, that she was not finished, that the life she had built with her hands and her decades and her love was hers, not to be held in trust for others, not to be managed down to a smaller and smaller footprint until she disappeared entirely into other people's comfort. Hers, to live in, fully, while she still could. I don't know when exactly I came back to myself, but one morning I woke up and the coffee tasted right again, and I knew